Dame Agatha Mary Clarissa Christie, Lady Malawan, DBE, was an English crime novelist, short story writer and playwright. She also wrote 6 romances under the name Mary Westmacott, but she is best known for the 66 detective novels and 14 short story collections that she wrote under her own name, most of which revolve around the investigative work of such characters as Hercule Poirot, Jane Marple, Parker Pyne, Harley Quinn, Mr. Satterthwaite and Tommy and Tuppence Beresford. She wrote the world's longest-running play, a murder mystery, The Mousetrap. In 1971 she was made a dame for her contribution to literature. Christie was born into a wealthy upper-middle-class family in Torquay, Devon. She served in a hospital during the First World War before marrying and starting a family in London. She was initially unsuccessful at getting her work published, but in 1920 the Bodley Head Press published her novel The Mysterious Affair at Styles, featuring the character of Hercule Poirot. This launched her literary career. The Guinness Book of World Records lists Christie as the best-selling novelist of all time. Her novels have sold roughly 2 billion copies, and her estate claims that her works come third in the rankings of the world's most widely published books, behind only Shakespeare's works and the Bible. According to Index Translationum, she remains the most translated individual author, having been translated into at least 103 languages. And Then There Were None is Christie's best-selling novel, with 100 million sales to date, making it the world's best-selling mystery ever, and one of the best-selling books of all time. Christie's stage play The Mousetrap holds the record for the longest initial run. In 1955, Christie was the first recipient of the Mystery Writers of America's highest honor, the Grand Master Award. Later the same year, Witness for the Prosecution received an Edgar Award by the MWA for Best Play. In 2013, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd was voted the best crime novel ever by 600 fellow writers of the Crime Writers Association. On the 15th of September 2015, coinciding with Christie's 125th birthday, And Then There Were None was voted as the world's favorite Christie, followed closely by Murder on the Orient Express and The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. Most of her books and short stories have been adapted for television, radio, video games and comics, and more than 30 feature films have been based on her work. Life in career. Childhood. 1890 to 1901. Agatha Mary Clarissa Miller was born on the 15th of September 1890 into a wealthy upper-middle-class family in Ashfield, Torquay, Devon. Her mother, Clara Boehmer, was an Englishwoman who was born in Belfast in 1854 to Captain Frederick Boehmer and Mary Ann West, the couple's only daughter. Clara Boehmer had 4 brothers, one of whom died young. Captain Boehmer was killed in a riding accident while stationed on Jersey in April 1863, leaving Mary Ann to raise her children alone on a meager income. Under financial strain, she sent Clara to live with her Aunt Margaret Miller, who had married a wealthy American, Nathaniel Frary Miller, in 1863. The couple lived in Prinstead, West Sussex. Christie's father Frederick was a member of the small and wealthy American upper class, and had been sent to Switzerland for his education. He was considered personable and friendly by those who knew him. He soon developed a romantic relationship with Clara, and they were married in April 1878. Their first child, Margaret Frary Miller, was born in Torquay, where the couple were renting lodgings, while their second, Louis Monty Montant, was born in the U.S. state of New York, where Frederick was on a business trip. Clara soon purchased a villa in Torquay named Ashfield, in which to raise her family, and it was here that her third and final child, Agatha, was born. Christie described her childhood as very happy. She was surrounded by a series of strong and independent women from an early age. Her time was spent alternating between her home in Devon, her step-grandmother and aunt's house in Ealing, West London, and parts of southern Europe. where her family would holiday during the winter. Agatha was raised in a household with various esoteric beliefs and, like her siblings, believed that their mother Clara was a psychic with the ability of second sight. Her mother insisted that she receive a home education, and so her parents were responsible for teaching her to read and write and to be able to perform basic arithmetic, a subject that she particularly enjoyed. They also taught her about music, and she learned to play both the piano and the mandolin. Christie was a voracious reader from an early age. Among her earliest memories were those of reading the children's books written by Mrs. Molesworth, including The Adventures of Hare Baby, Christmas Tree Land, and The Magic Nuts. She also read the work of Edith Nesbit, including The Story of the Treasure Seekers, The Phoenix and the Carpet, and The Railway Children. When a little older, she moved on to reading the surreal verse of Edward Lear and Lewis Carroll. Much of her childhood was spent largely alone and separate from other children, although she spent much time with her pets, whom she adored. She eventually made friends with a group of other girls in Torquay, and she noted that one of the highlights of my existence was her appearance with them in a youth production of Gilbert and Sullivan's The Yeoman of the Guard, in which she played the hero, Colonel Fairfax. This was her last operatic role for, as she later wrote, an experience that you really enjoyed should never be repeated. Her father was often ill, suffering from a series of heart attacks, and he died in November 1901, aged 55. His death left the family devastated and in an uncertain economic situation. Clara and Agatha continued to live together in their Torquay home. Madge had moved to the nearby Cheadle Hall with her new husband, and Monty had joined the army and been sent to South Africa to fight in the Boer War. Agatha later claimed that her father's death, occurring when she was 11 years old, marked the end of her childhood. In 1902, Agatha was sent to receive a formal education at Miss Guyer's Girls' School in Torquay, but found it difficult to adjust to the disciplined atmosphere. In 1905, she was sent to Paris where she was educated in 3 pensions, Mademoiselle Cabinet's, Les Marronniers, and then Miss Dryden's, the last of which served primarily as a finishing school. Early literary attempts and the First World War. 1910–19 Agatha returned to England in 1910 and found that her mother Clara was ill. They decided to spend time together in the warmer climate of Cairo, then a popular tourist destination for wealthy Britons. They stayed for 3 months at the Gezira Palace Hotel. Agatha, always chaperoned by her mother, attended many social functions in search of a husband. She visited such ancient Egyptian monuments as the Great Pyramid of Giza, but did not exhibit the great interest in archaeology and Egyptology that became prominent in her later years. Returning to Britain, she continued her social activities, writing and performing in amateur theatrics. She also helped put on a play called The Bluebeard of Unhappiness with female friends. Her writing extended to both poetry and music. Some early works saw publication, but she decided against focusing on either of these as future professions. Christie wrote her first short story, The House of Beauty, while recovering in bed from an undisclosed illness. This was about 6,000 words on the topic of madness and dreams, a subject of fascination for her. Biographer Janet Morgan commented that, despite infelicities of style, the story was nevertheless compelling. Other shorts followed, most of them illustrating her interest in spiritualism and the paranormal. These included The Call of Wings and The Little Lonely God. Various magazines rejected all her early submissions, made under pseudonyms, although some were revised and published later, often with new titles. Christie then set her first novel, Snow Upon the Desert, in Cairo, and drew from her recent experiences in that city. written under the pseudonym Monosyllaba. She was perturbed when various publishers all declined. Clara suggested that her daughter ask for advice from a family friend and neighbor, writer Eden Philpotts, who obliged her inquiry, encouraged her writing, and sent her an introduction to his own literary agent, Hughes Massey, who rejected Snow Upon the Desert, and suggested a second novel. Christie continued searching for a husband, and entered into short-lived relationships with 4 separate men and an engagement with another. She then met Archibald Christie at a dance given by Lord and Lady Clifford at Ugbrook, about 12 miles from Torquay. Archie was born in India, the son of a judge in the Indian Civil Service. He was an army officer who was seconded to the Royal Flying Corps in April 1913. The couple quickly fell in love. Upon learning that he would be stationed in Farnborough, Archie proposed marriage, and Agatha accepted. With the outbreak of World War I in August 1914, Archie was sent to France to fight the German forces. They married on the afternoon of Christmas Eve 1914 at Emmanuel Church, Clifton, Bristol, which was close to the home of his parents. While Archie was on home leave, rising through the ranks, he was eventually stationed back to Britain in September 1918 as a colonel in the Air Ministry. Agatha involved herself in the war effort, joining the Voluntary Aid Detachment in 1914, and attending to wounded soldiers at a hospital in Torquay as an unpaid VAD nurse. She was responsible for aiding the doctors and maintaining morale. She performed 3,400 hours of unpaid work between October 1914 and December 1916. She qualified as an apothecary's assistant in 1917 and, as a dispenser, she earned £16 a year until the end of her service in September 1918. After the war, the couple settled into a flat at 5 Northwick Terrace in St. John's Wood, northwest London. First novels. 1919–23. Christie had long been a fan of detective novels, having enjoyed Wilkie Collins' The Woman in White and The Moonstone, as well as Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's early Sherlock Holmes stories. She wrote her own detective novel, The Mysterious Affair at Styles, featuring Hercule Poirot, a former Belgian police officer noted for his twirly large, magnificent moustaches, and egg-shaped head. Poirot had taken refuge in Britain after Germany had invaded Belgium. Christie's inspiration for this stemmed from real Belgian refugees who were living in Torquay. The Styles manuscript was not accepted by such publishing companies as Hodder and Stoughton and Methuen. She did so and then signed a contract which she later felt was exploitative. Christie meanwhile settled into married life, giving birth to her only child, daughter Rosalind Margaret, at Ashfield in August 1919, where the couple spent much of their time, having few friends in London. Archie left the Air Force at the end of the war and started working in the city financial sector at a relatively low salary, though they still employed a maid. Christie's second novel, The Secret Adversary, featured a new detective couple, Tommy and Tuppence, again published by the Bodley Head. It earned her £50. A third novel again featured Poirot, Murder on the Links, as did short stories commissioned by Bruce Ingram, editor of Sketch magazine. In order to tour the world promoting the British Empire exhibition, the couple left their daughter Rosalind with Agatha's mother and sister. They travelled to South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and Hawaii. They learned to surf prone in South Africa. Then, in Waikiki, they were among the first Britons to surf standing up. Disappearance. In late 1926, Archie asked Agatha for a divorce. He was in love with Nancy Neeler, who had been a friend of Major Belcher, director of the British Empire Mission, on the promotional tour a few years earlier. On the 3rd of December 1926, the Christies quarrelled, and Archie left their house, Styles, in Sunningdale, Berkshire, to spend the weekend with his mistress at Godalming, Surrey. That same evening, around 9:45 p.m., Christie disappeared from her home, leaving behind a letter for her secretary saying that she was going to Yorkshire. Her car, a Morris Cowley, was later found at Newlands Corner, perched above a chalk quarry, with an expired driving licence and clothes. Her disappearance caused an outcry from the public. Home Secretary William Joynson Hicks pressured police, and a newspaper offered a £100 reward. Over 1,000 police officers, 15,000 volunteers, and several aeroplanes scoured the rural landscape. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle even gave a spirit medium one of Christie's gloves to find the missing woman. Dorothy L. Sayers visited the house in Surrey, later using the scenario in her book Unnatural Death. Christie's disappearance was featured on the front page of the New York Times. Despite the extensive manhunt, she was not found for 10 days. On 14 December 1926, she was found at the Swan Hydropathic Hotel in Harrogate, Yorkshire, registered as Mrs. Teresa Neela from Cape Town. Christie's autobiography makes no reference to her disappearance. 2 doctors diagnosed her as suffering from amnesia, yet opinion remains divided as to why she disappeared. She was known to be in a depressed state from literary overwork, her mother's death earlier that year, and her husband's infidelity. Public reaction at the time was largely negative, supposing a publicity stunt or attempt to frame her husband for murder. The 1979 Michael Apted film Agatha features a disclaimer in the opening credits stating that what follows is an imaginary solution to an authentic mystery. The film starred Vanessa Redgrave and Timothy Dalton as Agatha and Archie, and depicts Christie planning suicide in such a way as to frame her husband's mistress for her murder. An American reporter, played by Dustin Hoffman, follows her closely and stops the plan. The film outraged Christie's heirs, who fought 2 unsuccessful lawsuits in the United States to try to prevent it from being distributed. Author Jared Cade interviewed numerous witnesses and relatives for his sympathetic biography Agatha Christie and the 11 Missing Days, revised 2011. He provided substantial evidence to suggest that she planned the event to embarrass her husband, never anticipating the resulting escalated melodrama. The Christies divorced in 1928, and Archie married Nancy Neela. Agatha retained custody of daughter Rosalind and the Christie name for her writing. During their marriage, she published 6 novels, a collection of short stories, and a number of short stories in magazines. Second marriage and later life. In 1930, Christie married archaeologist O. Max Mallowan, having met him during an archaeological dig. Their marriage was happy and lasted until Christie's death in 1976. Mallowan introduced her to wine, which she never enjoyed, preferring to drink water in restaurants. She tried unsuccessfully to make herself like cigarettes by smoking one after lunch and one after dinner every day for 6 months. Christie frequently used settings that were familiar to her for her stories. Her travels with Mallowan contributed background to several of her novels set in the Middle East. Other novels were set in and around Torquay, where she was raised. Christie's 1934 novel Murder on the Orient Express was written in the Pera Palace Hotel in Istanbul, Turkey, the southern terminus of the railway. The hotel maintains Christie's room as a memorial to the author. The Greenway estate in Devon, acquired by the couple as a summer residence in 1938, is now in the care of the National Trust. Christie often stayed at Abney Hall, Cheshire, owned by her brother-in-law, James Watts, basing at least 2 stories there. A short story, The Adventure of the Christmas Pudding, in the story collection of the same name, and the novel After the Funeral. Abney became Agatha's greatest inspiration for country house life, with all its servants and grandeur being woven into her plots. The descriptions of the fictional chimneys, stony gates, and other houses in her stories are mostly Abney in various forms. During the Second World War, Christie worked in the pharmacy at University College Hospital, London, where she acquired a knowledge of poisons that she put to good use in her post-war crime novels. For example, the use of thallium as a poison was suggested to her by UCH chief pharmacist Harold Davis, and in The Pale Horse, published in 1961, she employed it to dispatch a series of victims, the first clue to the murder method coming from the victim's loss of hair. So accurate was her description of thallium poisoning that on at least one occasion it helped solve a case that was baffling doctors. Christie lived in Chelsea, first in Cresswell Place and later in Sheffield Terrace. Both properties are now marked by blue plaques. In 1934, she and Max Malawan purchased Winterbrook House in Winterbrook, a hamlet in the ancient parish of Chelsea but adjoining Wallingford, then in Berkshire. This was their main residence for the rest of their lives and the place where Christie did most of her writing. This house, too, bears a blue plaque. Christie led a very low-profile life despite being known in the town of Wallingford, where she was for many years president of the local amateur dramatic society. Around 1941–42, the British intelligence agency MI5 investigated Christie after a character called Major Bletchley appeared in her 1941 thriller N.R.M., which was about a hunt for a pair of deadly fifth columnists in wartime England. MI5 was afraid that Christie had a spy in Britain's top-secret code-breaking centre, Bletchley Park. The agency fears were allayed when Christie commented to codebreaker Dilly Knox that Bletchley was simply the name of one of my least lovable characters, to honour her many literary works. She was appointed Commander of the Order of the British Empire in the 1956 New Year Honours. The next year, she became the president of the Detection Club. In the 1971 New Year Honours, she was promoted Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire, 3 years after her husband had been knighted for his archaeological work in 1968. They were one of the few married couples where both partners were honoured in their own right. From 1968, owing to her husband's knighthood, Christie could also be styled Lady Malawan. From 1971 to 1974, Christie's health began to fail, although she continued to write. Recently, using experimental tools of textual analysis, Canadian researchers have suggested that Christie may have begun to suffer from Alzheimer's disease or other dementia.